Mr. Robert Bolton, the gentleman connected with the press. In the parlor of the Green Dragon, a public house in the immediate neighborhood of Westminster Bridge, everybody talks politics, every evening, the great political authority being Mr. Robert Bolton, an individual who defines himself as a gentleman connected with the press, which is a definition of peculiar indefiniteness. Mr. Robert Bolton's regular circle of admirers and listeners are an undertaker, a greengrocer, a hairdresser, a baker, a large stomach surmounted by a man's head, and placed on the top of two particularly short legs, and a thin man in black, name, profession, and pursuit unknown, who always sits in the same position, always displays the same long, vacant face, and never opens his lips, surrounded as he is by most enthusiastic conversation, except to puff forth a volume of tobacco smoke or give vent to a very snappy, loud, and shrill hem. The conversation sometimes turns upon literature, Mr. Bolton being a literary character, and always upon such news of the day as is exclusively possessed by that talented individual. I found myself, of course, accidentally in the Green Dragon the other evening, and being somewhat amused by the following conversation, preserved it. "Can you lend me a 10-pound note till Christmas?" inquired the hairdresser of the stomach. "Where's your security, Mr. Clip?" "My stock in trade. There's enough of it, I'm thinking, Mr. Thickness. Some 50 wigs, 2 poles, half a dozen head blocks, and a dead Bruin." "No, I won't then," growled out Thickness. "I lends nothing on the security of the wigs or the poles either. As for wigs, they're cheats. As for the poles, they've got no cash. I never have nothing to do with blockheads unless I can't outwait it, ironically, and a dead bear 's about as much use to me as I could be to a dead bear." "Well then," urged the other, "there's a book as belonged to Pope, Byron's poems, valued at £40, because it's got Pope's identical scratch on the back. What do you think of that for security?" "Well, to be sure," cried the baker, "but how do you mean, Mr. Clip?" "Mean? Why, that it's got the autograph of Pope. Steal not this book, for fear of hangman's rope, for it belongs to Alexander Pope. All that's written on the inside of the binding of the book. So, as my son says, we're bound to believe it." "Well, sir," observed the undertaker, deferentially, and in a half-whisper, leaning over the table, and knocking over the hairdresser's grog as he spoke, "that argument's very easy upset." "Perhaps, sir," said Clip, a little flurried, "you'll pay for the first upset afore you thinks of another." "Now," said the undertaker, bowing amicably to the hairdresser, I think, you'll excuse me, Mr. Clip, I think, you see, that won't go down with the present company. Unfortunately, my master had the honor of making the coffin of that 'ere lord's housemaid, not no more nor 20 year ago. Don't think I'm proud on it, gentlemen, others might be, but I hate rank of any sort. I've no more respect for a lord's footman than I have for any respectable tradesman in this room. I may say no more nor I have for Mr. Clip," bowing. "Therefore, that 'ere lord must have been born long after Pope died, and it's a logical interference to defer that they neither of them lived at the same time. So what I mean is this here, that Pope never had no book, never seed felt, never smelt no book, triumphantly, as belonged to that 'ere lord. And, gentlemen, when I consider how patiently you have eared the ideas what I have expressed, I feel bound, as the best way to reward you for the kindness you have exhibited, to sit down without saying anything more, particular as I perceive a worthier visitor nor myself is just entered. I am not in the habit of paying compliments, gentlemen. When I do, therefore, I hope I strikes with double force." "Ah, Mr. Murgatroyd, what's all this about striking with double force?" said the object of the above remark as he entered. "I never excuse a man's getting into a rage during winter, even when he's seated so close to the fire as you are. It is very injudicious to put yourself into such a perspiration. What is the cause of this extreme physical and mental excitement, sir?" Such was the very philosophical address of Mr. Robert Bolton, a shorthand writer, as he termed himself, a bit of equivoque passing current among his fraternity, which must give the uninitiated a vast idea of the establishment of the ministerial organ, while to the initiated it signifies that no one paper can lay claim to the enjoyment of their services. Mr. Bolton was a young man, with a somewhat sickly and very dissipated expression of countenance. His habiliments were composed of an exquisite union of gentility, slovenliness, assumption, simplicity, newness, and old age. Half of him was dressed for the winter, the other half for the summer. His hat was of the newest cut, the d'Orsay. His trousers had been white, but the inroads of mud and ink, etc., had given them a piebald appearance. Round his throat he wore a very high black cravat of the most tyrannical stiffness, while his tout ensemble was hidden beneath the enormous folds of an old brown poodle-collared greatcoat, which was closely buttoned up to the aforesaid cravat. His fingers peeped through the ends of his black kid gloves, and 2 of the toes of each foot took a similar view of society through the extremities of his highlows. Sacred to the bare walls of his garret be the mysteries of his interior dress. He was a short, spare man, of a somewhat inferior deportment. Everybody seemed influenced by his entry into the room, and his salutation of each member partook of the patronizing. The hairdresser made way for him between himself and the stomach. A minute afterwards he had taken possession of his pint and pipe. A pause in the conversation took place. Everybody was waiting, anxious for his first observation. "Horrid murder in Westminster this morning," observed Mr. Bolton. Everybody changed their positions. All eyes were fixed upon the man of paragraphs. "A baker murdered his son by boiling him in a copper," said Mr. Bolton. "Good heavens!" exclaimed everybody in simultaneous horror. "Boiled him, gentlemen," added Mr. Bolton with the most effective emphasis. "Boiled him." "And the particulars, Mr. B?" inquired the hairdresser. "The particulars." Mr. Bolton took a very long draught of porter, and some 2 or 3 dozen whiffs of tobacco, doubtless to instill into the commercial capacities of the company the superiority of a gentleman connected with the press, and then said, "The man was a baker, gentlemen." Every one looked at the baker present, who stared at Bolton. His victim, being his son, also was necessarily the son of a baker. The wretched murderer had a wife, whom he was frequently in the habit, while in an intoxicated state, of kicking, pummeled, flinging mugs at, knocking down, and half-killing while in bed, by inserting in her mouth a considerable portion of a sheet or blanket. The speaker took another draught, everybody looked at everybody else, and exclaimed, "Horrid." "It appears in evidence, gentlemen," continued Mr. Bolton, "that, on the evening of yesterday, Sawyer the baker came home in a reprehensible state of beer. Mrs. S., connubially considerate, carried him in that condition upstairs into his chamber, and consigned him to their mutual couch. In a minute or 2 she lay sleeping beside the man whom the morrow's dawn beheld a murderer. Entire silence informed the reporter that his picture had attained the awful effect he desired. The son came home about an hour afterwards, opened the door, and went up to bed. Scarcely, gentlemen, conceive his feelings of alarm, scarcely had he taken off his indescribables, when shrieks, to his experienced ear maternal shrieks, scared the silence of surrounding night. He put his indescribables on again and ran downstairs. He opened the door of the parental bedchamber. His father was dancing upon his mother. What must have been his feelings? In the agony of the minute, he rushed at his male parent as he was about to plunge a knife into the side of his female. The mother shrieked. The father caught the son, who had wrested the knife from the paternal grasp up in his arms, carried him downstairs, shoved him into a copper of boiling water among some linen, closed the lid, and jumped upon the top of it, in which position he was found with a ferocious countenance by the mother, who arrived in the melancholy wash-house just as he had so settled himself. "Where's my boy?" shrieked the mother. "In that copper boiling," coolly replied the benign father. Struck by the awful intelligence, the mother rushed from the house and alarmed the neighborhood. The police entered a minute afterwards. The father, having bolted the wash-house door, had bolted himself. They dragged the lifeless body of the boiled baker from the cauldron, and, with a promptitude commendable in men of their station, they immediately carried it to the station-house. Subsequently, the baker was apprehended while seated on the top of a lamp-post in Parliament Street, lighting his pipe. The whole horrible ideality of the mysteries of Udolpho, condensed into the pithy effect of a 10-line paragraph, could not possibly have so affected the narrator's auditory. Silence, the purest and most noble of all kinds of applause, bore ample testimony to the barbarity of the baker, as well as to Bolton's knack of narration, and it was only broken after some minutes had elapsed by interjectional expressions of the intense indignation of every man present. The baker wondered how a British baker could so disgrace himself and the highly honorable calling to which he belonged, and the others indulged in a variety of wonderments connected with the subject. among which not the least wonderment was that which was awakened by the genius and information of Mr. Robert Bolton, who, after a glowing eulogium on himself and his unspeakable influence with the daily press, was proceeding, with a most solemn countenance, to hear the pros and cons of the Pope autograph question, when I took up my hat and left. Familiar epistle from a parent to a child aged 2 years and 2 months. My child, to recount with what trouble I have brought you up, with what an anxious eye I have regarded your progress, how late and how often I have sat up at night working for you, and how many thousand letters I have received from, and written to your various relations and friends, many of whom have been of a querulous and irritable turn, to dwell on the anxiety and tenderness with which I have, as far as I possess the power, inspected and chosen your food, rejecting the indigestible and heavy matter which some injudicious but well-meaning old ladies would have had you swallow, and retaining only those light and pleasant articles which I deemed calculated to keep you free from all gross humors, and to render you an agreeable child, and one who might be popular with society in general, to dilate on the steadiness with which I have prevented your annoying any company by talking politics, always assuring you that you would thank me for it yourself some day when you grew older. To expatiate, in short, upon my own assiduity as a parent is beside my present purpose, though I cannot but contemplate your fair appearance, your robust health, and unimpeded circulation, which I take to be the great secret of your good looks, without the liveliest satisfaction and delight. It is a trite observation, and one which, young as you are, I have no doubt you have often heard repeated, that we have fallen upon strange times, and live in days of constant shiftings and changes. I had a melancholy instance of this only a week or two since. I was returning from Manchester to London by the mail train, when I suddenly fell into another train, a mixed train of reflection, occasioned by the dejected and disconsolate demeanor of the post office guard. We were stopping at some station where they take in water, when he dismounted slowly from the little box in which he sits in ghastly mockery of his old condition, with pistol and blunderbuss beside him, ready to shoot the first highwayman or railwayman who shall attempt to stop the horses, which now travel, when they travel at all, inside and in a portable stable invented for the purpose. He dismounted, I say, slowly and sadly, from his post, and looking mournfully about him as if in dismal recollection of the old roadside public-house, the blazing fire, the glass of foaming ale, the buxom handmaid and admiring hangers-on of tap-room and stable, all honored by his notice, and, retiring a little apart, stood leaning against a signal post, surveying the engine with a look of combined affliction and disgust which no words can describe. His scarlet coat and golden lace were tarnished with ignoble smoke, flakes of soot had fallen on his bright green shawl, his pride in days of yore. The steam condensed in the tunnel from which we had just emerged shone upon his hat like rain. His eye betokened that he was thinking of the coachman, and as it wandered to his own seat and his own fast-fading garb, it was plain to see that he felt his office and himself had alike no business there, and were nothing but an elaborate practical joke. As we whirled away, I was led insensibly into an anticipation of those days to come, when mail coach guards shall no longer be judges of horseflesh, when a mail coach guard shall never even have seen a horse, when stations shall have superseded stables, and corn shall have given place to coke. In those dawning times, thought I, exhibition rooms shall teem with portraits of Her Majesty's favorite engine, with boilers after nature by future Lanciers. Some Amberg, yet unborn, shall break wild horses by his magic power, and in the dress of a mail coach guard exhibit his trained animals in a mock mail coach. Then shall wondering crowds observe how that, with the exception of his whip, it is all his eye, and crowned heads shall see them fed on oats, and stand alone unmoved and undismayed, while counters flee affrighted when the coursers neigh. Such, my child, were the reflections from which I was only awakened then, as I am now, by the necessity of attending to matters of present though minor importance. I offer no apology to you for the digression, for it brings me very naturally to the subject of change, which is the very subject of which I desire to treat. In fact, my child, you have changed hands. Henceforth I resign you to the guardianship and protection of one of my most intimate and valued friends, Mr. Ainsworth, with whom, and with you, my best wishes and warmest feelings will ever remain. I reap no gain or profit by parting from you, nor will any conveyance of your property be required, for, in this respect, you have always been literally Bentley's miscellany, and never mine. Unlike the driver of the old Manchester mail, I regard this altered state of things with feelings of unmingled pleasure and satisfaction. Unlike the guard of the new Manchester mail, your guard is at home in his new place, and has roistering highwaymen and gallant desperadoes ever within call. And if I might compare you, my child, to an engine, not a Tory engine, nor a Whig engine, but a brisk and rapid locomotive, your friends and patrons to passengers, and he who now stands towards you in loco parentis as the skillful engineer and supervisor of the whole, I would humbly crave leave to postpone the departure of the train on its new and auspicious course for one brief instant, while, with hat in hand, I approach side by side with the friend who traveled with me on the old road, and presume to solicit favor and kindness in behalf of him and his new charge, both for their sakes and that of the old coachman. Boz,